Mark Regev is a senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and joins us now. Mr. Regev, thank you for joining us on Newshour. I don't know if you've had a chance to see this text, this draft resolution that's come through from the UN Security Council yet, but it calls for urgent and extended humanitarian pauses and corridors throughout the Gaza Strip for a sufficient number of days to enable all the humanitarian access that's needed. If that is voted through, I don't know yet what the US is planning to do. Is that something that you would respect?
So Israel's position has been that we agree to humanitarian corridors to allow aid to come in and so forth. That means a specific cessation of hostilities in a specific area for a specific time. And we will agree to a more comprehensive cessation of the violence for the release of our hostages. And that is our position. And I think it's clear.
Yeah. And in terms of the demand for the release of the hostages, I mean, you'll be aware that obviously Hamas and the other groups that are holding the hostages will want there to be a price beyond there being a ceasefire. They will be talking about the release of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel, and that's something that the hostage families, the families of those who are still being held captive inside Gaza, say that you should consider. Are you considering that?
Well, we've done it in the past, as you know. In late November, we had a humanitarian pause in place, which involved the release of Israeli hostages. We let out Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails then. And so if we've done it in the past, you can presume we could do it in the future. The goal is, of course, in this operation, is to have all our people come back. And that remains a central part of our campaign against Hamas.
Are you sensitive to the criticism, the growing criticism from your main Western backer, the United States, that in Joe Biden's words, you are starting to lose support by the indiscriminate bombing that takes place? And indeed, there have been further airstrikes today.
So if my memory serves me correctly, the White House rolled back those remarks a bit, and we've just had here earlier this week
forgive me for interrupting. I mean, you say they rolled it back. I mean, this was Joe Biden speaking verbatim.
Correct, but afterwards, once again, they clarified those comments. We just had here Lloyd Austin, the American Secretary of Defense. We had good conversations, and we share with the Americans a common goal, and that is that Israel has not only the right, but the obligation to act against Hamas to protect our civilian population, and that Hamas's military machine will be destroyed. And there has to be a new situation in Gaza whereby Hamas no longer has political control over this strip. It can no longer be an enclave of terror that attacks its neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, and I totally understand that that has been your consistent approach. But I mean, you would be flying in the face of reality if you did not accept, surely, that the Americans have been increasingly and openly concerned about the tactics that you were using to get to that presumed goal.
So, of course, with the Secretary of Defense, when he was here, we had a very serious discussion about operations on the ground. And Israel has said all along, we want to make a maximum effort to avoid seeing civilians caught up in the crossfire. And that's why we have urged civilians and continue to urge civilians to leave areas where we know there's going to be combat. And for those who remain behind, we still make a maximum effort to distinguish between civilians who are not the target of our operation and combatants, Hamas terrorists, who we want to get and kill.
Yeah, well, I mean, if that is the case, one wonders why quite so many civilians are being killed, and indeed the proportion of civilian casualties is far higher than previous conflicts in Gaza.
I think, first of all, it has to be understood that we see every civilian casualty as a tragedy, while for Hamas, every civilian casualty is their strategy, that they have adopted a deliberate policy of not only butchering Israeli civilians, but of using Gaza's civilian population as a human shield for their war machine to protect their terror machine. And it's not just Israel that has said so. The United States has said so. the UK, the European Union, that Hamas's policy is well known, that they are deliberately sacrificing Gaza's civilians on the altar of their very extreme agenda.
Mark Regev, Senior Advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, thank you very much for joining us.